What if the empty space on your grocery store shelf wasn't temporary? What if that missing item wasn't coming back next week? Or even next month? What if the next restock wasn't expected until sometime in 2027? It sounds unbelievable. After all, we're used to grocery stores having almost everything we need, almost all the time. If one brand sells out, another usually takes its place. If one shipment is delayed, another truck often arrives within days. That's the way modern grocery stores have worked for decades. But history has shown us that this system isn't invincible. When severe weather strikes major farming regions, when transportation networks slow down, when disease affects livestock, when global conflicts interrupt trade, or when millions of shoppers begin buying the same products all at once, store shelves can stay empty much longer than anyone expected. And sometimes, the products that disappear aren't rare or expensive. They're the everyday foods families depend on every single week. The challenge isn't always that the food no longer exists. Sometimes production falls behind demand. Sometimes manufacturers struggle to obtain key ingredients. Sometimes farmers experience poor harvests. And in other cases, companies simply can't replenish inventory fast enough to keep pace with consumer buying. That's when shortages become more than an inconvenience. They become expensive. As supplies shrink, prices often climb rapidly. People begin visiting multiple stores looking for the same item. Social media fills with photos of empty shelves. And suddenly, products that seemed ordinary yesterday become almost impossible to find. Experienced preppers understand something many shoppers don't. By the time everyone is talking about shortages, the best opportunities to prepare have already passed. That's why today's countdown is so important. We're looking at 11 foods that could become extremely difficult to restock before 2027 if supply pressures continue. These are products with long production cycles, weather-sensitive crops, complicated global supply chains, or consistently strong consumer demand. This isn't about predicting that every store will completely run out. No one can know exactly what the future holds. Instead, this is about understanding which foods face the greatest risk of extended supply disruptions, and why adding them to your pantry now may be one of the smartest shopping decisions you make this year. As we count down from number 11 to number 1, you'll discover why each food is vulnerable, what factors could keep supplies tight, and how experienced preppers prepare without overspending or panic buying. Some of the foods near the top of today's list affect hundreds of other grocery items, meaning their shortages could ripple throughout the entire supermarket. So be sure to stay until the end. The number 1 food isn't just difficult to replace. It quietly supports thousands of products found in nearly every kitchen. And before we begin, if you enjoy practical preparedness, smart stockpiling strategies, emergency food storage tips, and staying ahead of supply chain disruptions, be sure to subscribe to Prepper Pulse and turn on notifications. Every week, we share realistic preparedness advice designed to help you protect your family, stretch your grocery budget, and stay ready for whatever comes next. Now, let's begin with food number 11. Number 11. Olive oil. Kicking off our countdown at number 11 is a pantry staple that has quietly become one of the most vulnerable foods in the global grocery market. Olive oil. For many families, it's simply another bottle sitting next to the stove. Something used for salad dressings, pasta dishes, roasted vegetables, marinades, homemade bread, or everyday cooking. But behind that bottle is a supply chain that's becoming increasingly fragile. Unlike many cooking oils that come from several different crops grown across multiple regions, high-quality olive oil depends almost entirely on olive trees that require years to mature and very specific growing conditions. And that's where the problems begin. Olive trees thrive in Mediterranean climates, where mild winters and warm, dry summers have supported harvests for centuries. But in recent years, many of the world's largest olive-producing regions have faced repeated droughts, record-breaking heat waves, unpredictable rainfall, and poor harvests. When an olive tree experiences prolonged stress from extreme weather, it doesn't just affect one season. It can reduce production for multiple years. That's a major difference between olives and many annual crops. Farmers can't simply plant new olive trees today and expect a full harvest next season. New trees often require several years before they begin producing significant amounts of fruit. That means recovering from poor harvests takes patience. Even if weather conditions improve tomorrow, production doesn't instantly bounce back. Then there's the growing global demand. Olive oil has become increasingly popular as more people choose Mediterranean-style diets and healthier cooking oils. Restaurants use enormous quantities. Food manufacturers rely on it for premium products. And millions of households purchase it every week. When demand keeps increasing while harvests remain inconsistent, prices usually move in only one direction: up. Another problem is authenticity. During periods of limited supply, reports of diluted or mislabeled olive oil often become more common in parts of the global marketplace. While regulations help protect consumers in many countries, tighter supplies can still create opportunities for lower quality products to enter the market. That's one more reason experienced shoppers prefer buying trusted brands before shortages become widespread. Now, does this mean every bottle of olive oil will disappear until 2027? Of course not. But certain brands, premium varieties, and imported products could become much harder to find if poor harvests continue and inventories remain tight. Some grocery stores may receive smaller shipments. Others may carry fewer choices. And prices could remain elevated for much longer than many shoppers expect. Preparedness isn't about assuming the worst. It's about recognizing when a product has multiple risk factors all pointing in the same direction. Olive oil checks many of those boxes. Fortunately, it's also relatively easy to store. Unopened bottles keep best in a cool, dark location away from direct sunlight and excessive heat. Leaving them next to a hot stove or in a sunny window can shorten their shelf life and reduce quality. Rotation is simple. Use your oldest bottle first and replace it when prices are favorable. Buying one extra bottle during a good sale is often a smarter strategy than waiting until prices spike. Another lesson seasoned preppers understand is diversification. While olive oil may be your preferred choice for many recipes, keeping a backup bottle of another cooking oil, such as vegetable or canola oil, gives you flexibility if olive oil becomes temporarily scarce or too expensive. The goal isn't to replace your favorite foods. It's to ensure you always have practical alternatives. Olive oil earns the number 11 spot because recovering from poor harvests can take years, not months. When production falls behind growing global demand, store shelves don't always recover quickly. And if supply pressures continue, some varieties could remain difficult to find well into 2027. But the next food on our list may be even more concerning. It's something millions of Americans enjoy every morning, yet its supply depends on a crop that's becoming increasingly vulnerable to weather, disease, and rising production costs around the world. Number 10. Coffee. For millions of people, the day doesn't officially begin until that first cup of coffee. It's more than just a drink. It's a routine. A comfort. For some, it's practically a necessity. That's why coffee shortages or major price increases tend to grab attention so quickly. But what many shoppers don't realize is just how fragile the global coffee supply really is. Unlike products that can be grown in dozens of different climates, coffee depends on a relatively small number of growing regions with very specific weather conditions. Coffee trees need consistent rainfall, moderate temperatures, healthy soil, and stable growing seasons. Unfortunately, those conditions have become increasingly unpredictable. Extended droughts have reduced harvests in some regions. Heavy rainfall has damaged crops in others. Unexpected frosts have harmed coffee trees that took years to mature. Extreme heat has stressed plants, reducing both the quantity and quality of beans they produce. And here's the challenge. A coffee tree isn't like an annual crop that can simply be replanted and harvested a few months later. New coffee plants often take several years before they produce a meaningful harvest. That means poor growing seasons today can continue affecting global supply well into the future. Recovery is slow. Very slow. But weather isn't the only problem. Coffee must travel thousands of miles before it reaches your kitchen. The beans are harvested, processed, dried, sorted, transported to ports, loaded onto cargo ships, shipped across oceans, roasted, packaged, distributed, and finally delivered to grocery stores. Every one of those steps depends on labor, fuel, equipment, and reliable transportation. When shipping costs rise or logistics slow down, the price of coffee almost always follows. Another factor is demand. Coffee remains one of the most widely consumed beverages on Earth. Even when prices increase, millions of people continue buying it because it's already part of their daily routine. That steady demand means there isn't much room for supply to fall before prices begin climbing sharply. Experienced preppers understand this. They don't necessarily expect coffee to disappear completely. Instead, they recognize that certain brands, premium roasts, imported varieties, or specialty coffees may become difficult to find if harvests continue falling short. Some products could remain out of stock for extended periods while manufacturers prioritize their most popular lines. That's why preparedness isn't about buying 10 years' worth of coffee. It's about building a practical reserve before shortages or price spikes become widespread. Storage is relatively simple. Whole coffee beans generally retain freshness longer than pre-ground coffee because they're exposed to less air. Keeping unopened packages in a cool, dry pantry helps preserve flavor. Instant coffee is another excellent preparedness option. It stores for a long time, requires very little space, and only needs hot water to prepare. For many emergency planners, it's one of the easiest comfort items to keep on hand. Another smart habit is rotating your supply. Use the oldest coffee first. Replace it during regular grocery trips. That way your pantry stays fresh while protecting you from unexpected price increases. And don't overlook the emotional value of familiar routines. During stressful times, whether it's a natural disaster, an economic downturn, or an extended power outage, a simple cup of coffee can provide a sense of normalcy that helps reduce stress and improve morale. Preparedness isn't only about surviving difficult situations. It's about making those situations a little easier to manage. Coffee earns the number 10 spot because it depends on long production cycles, weather-sensitive crops, global transportation, and steady worldwide demand. If those pressures continue building, some coffee products could remain difficult to restock well into 2027. But the next item on our countdown is even more fundamental. It's a pantry staple found in nearly every kitchen, and if supplies tighten, the effects won't be limited to one grocery aisle. They'll spread throughout the entire store. Number 9. Wheat flour. At number 9 is something so common that most shoppers hardly notice it. Until it's missing. Wheat flour. Walk through your kitchen for a moment and think about everything that depends on it. Bread, pancakes, pizza dough, cookies, cakes, muffins, biscuits, pasta, tortillas, pie crusts, gravy. Even many frozen and packaged foods begin with one simple ingredient: flour. That's why flour isn't just another pantry staple. It's one of the foundations of the modern food system. If flour becomes difficult to restock, the effects reach far beyond the baking aisle. So why is flour on this list? The answer begins with wheat itself. Wheat is grown across many parts of the world, but successful harvests depend heavily on favorable weather. Extended droughts, flooding, extreme heat, and unexpected freezes can all reduce yields or affect grain quality. Even a modest decline in production can have a noticeable impact because wheat is consumed on an enormous scale. It's one of the most widely traded agricultural commodities in the world. Then come the production costs. Farmers face rising expenses for fertilizer, diesel fuel, machinery, irrigation, and labor. Milling companies must process millions of bushels of grain using energy-intensive equipment before flour ever reaches grocery store shelves. Every stage of the process adds cost. Every stage depends on a stable supply chain. Transportation creates another challenge. Flour is bulky and heavy. Moving it from mills to warehouses and then to retailers requires trucks, fuel, drivers, and reliable logistics. If transportation slows or becomes more expensive, replenishing grocery store inventories becomes increasingly difficult. And here's something many people forget. Flour isn't purchased only by households. Commercial bakeries use enormous quantities every day. Restaurants rely on it. Food manufacturers depend on it for thousands of packaged products. Schools, hospitals, hotels, Virtually every part of the food industry competes for the same supply. That means even if production remains relatively stable, strong demand can keep inventories tight for extended periods. Experienced preppers understand that flour shortages rarely happen in isolation. If wheat supplies become strained, consumers often notice rising prices for bread, pasta, crackers, breakfast cereals, and baked goods at the same time. That's because they're all connected. Now, flour doesn't last forever. But with proper storage, it can remain usable for a considerable period. Many preparedness-minded families transfer flour into airtight containers to protect it from moisture and insects. Others package it in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers for longer-term storage. Just remember to rotate your supply. The goal isn't to hide food in a closet for years. The goal is to make today's grocery purchases part of tomorrow's meals. Another important preparedness lesson is learning basic baking skills. A bag of flour becomes much more valuable when you know how to turn it into bread, biscuits, tortillas, or pizza dough. Those simple skills provide flexibility that many households won't have if grocery prices rise or certain bakery products become harder to find. Preparedness isn't just about storing ingredients. It's about knowing how to use them. That's exactly why flour earns the number 9 spot on today's countdown. It quietly supports hundreds of foods, depends on a complex agricultural and transportation network, and could become increasingly difficult to restock if wheat supplies remain under pressure. But now we're moving to number 8. The next food may seem ordinary, yet it's one of the most heavily traded staples on Earth. And if supply disruptions continue, it could disappear from store shelves far longer than most people expect. Number 8. Rice. At number 8 is one of the most important foods on the planet. Rice. For more than half of the world's population, rice isn't just another grocery item. It's a daily necessity. Entire cultures and cuisines are built around it. And that's exactly why any disruption to its supply can have consequences far beyond a single grocery aisle. Most shoppers assume rice will always be available. After all, grocery stores usually dedicate an entire section to it. White rice, brown rice, jasmine rice, basmati rice, long grain, short grain, minute rice. The shelves often look full, but appearances can be deceiving. The global rice market is surprisingly sensitive to change. Rice requires enormous amounts of water during its growing season. If drought conditions reduce reservoir levels or irrigation becomes limited, harvests can shrink dramatically. On the other hand, excessive flooding can destroy fields before farmers have a chance to harvest their crops. Extreme weather doesn't need to affect every rice-growing region. Problems in just a few major producing countries can tighten global supplies because rice is one of the most heavily traded food commodities in the world. Another issue is export policy. When governments become concerned about domestic food security, they may choose to limit exports in order to protect supplies at home. That means countries that normally import large quantities of rice suddenly have fewer options available. As buyers compete for a smaller global supply, prices often rise, and store inventories can remain tight for much longer than expected. Then there are transportation costs. Rice travels a long journey before it reaches your pantry. It must be harvested, dried, milled, packaged, loaded into shipping containers, transported across oceans, moved through ports, delivered by rail and truck, and finally stocked onto grocery store shelves. Every step depends on reliable logistics, affordable fuel, and available labor. If even one part of that chain slows down, replenishing inventory becomes more difficult. Now consider consumer behavior. Whenever people hear about inflation or food shortages, rice is often one of the first products they buy in larger quantities. Why? Because it's affordable. It's filling. It pairs with almost any meal. And when stored properly, it can last for years. That surge in demand alone can empty shelves surprisingly fast, even when there isn't a true shortage at the production level. Experienced preppers recognize this pattern. They don't wait for headlines announcing supply problems. They slowly build a pantry during normal shopping trips. One extra bag this week, another next month. Over time, those small purchases create a comfortable reserve without straining the family budget. Storage is one of rice's greatest strengths. White rice, when protected from moisture, insects, heat, and oxygen, has an exceptionally long storage life. Many preparedness experts store it in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers inside food-grade buckets. For most households, however, simply keeping unopened bags in a cool, dry pantry provides an excellent backup supply. Brown rice deserves a quick mention as well. It's nutritious and delicious, but because it contains more natural oils, it doesn't store nearly as long as white rice. If you're preparing for the long term, white rice is generally the better option. Rice earns the number 8 spot because it's one of the world's most essential staple foods, yet its supply depends on weather, international trade, transportation, and consumer demand, all factors that can remain unpredictable for extended periods. If those pressures continue, some varieties of rice could become much harder to restock before 2027. But the next food on our countdown is even more surprising. It's found in kitchens across America, helps preserve other foods, and has a long history of becoming difficult to find whenever agricultural production and global demand collide. Number 7. Sugar. At number 7 is a food that most people don't think much about, until they suddenly can't find it. Sugar. For many shoppers, it's simply another bag sitting on the baking aisle. Something you pick up once in a while for cookies, cakes, or coffee. But sugar is far more important than most people realize. It's one of the most widely used ingredients in the entire food industry. Walk through almost any grocery store and you'll find sugar in breakfast cereals, soft drinks, fruit juices, yogurt, peanut butter, bread, pasta sauces, salad dressings, ketchup, candy, ice cream, baked goods, and thousands of other packaged foods. That means if sugar supplies become tight, the effects don't stay in one aisle. They ripple throughout the entire grocery store. So why could sugar become difficult to restock before 2027? The answer starts with agriculture. Most of the world's sugar comes from sugarcane and sugar beets. Both crops depend on stable weather throughout the growing season. Extended drought can reduce yields. Heavy flooding can damage fields. Powerful storms can destroy crops just before harvest. And prolonged heat can lower production while increasing irrigation costs. Even when harvests are successful, the work isn't finished. Sugar must be harvested, transported, processed in specialized facilities, refined, packaged, and shipped across long distances before reaching retailers. Each of those steps requires fuel. Each depends on electricity. Each relies on skilled workers and functioning supply chains. If transportation slows or energy prices rise sharply, restocking grocery shelves becomes more expensive and often much slower. Then there's demand. Sugar isn't just purchased by families. Commercial bakeries need it every day. Candy manufacturers rely on it. Soft drink companies consume enormous quantities. Restaurants, hotels, food processors, all compete for the same supply. If production falls even slightly while demand stays strong, inventories can tighten surprisingly fast. Another reason experienced preppers value sugar is that it's more than just a sweetener. It's also a preservative. For generations, families have used sugar to make homemade jams, jellies, fruit preserves, syrups, and canned fruits. When fresh produce is abundant, sugar helps extend that harvest for months. If sugar becomes scarce or expensive, preserving other foods becomes more difficult as well. That's a connection many shoppers never think about. Preparedness isn't just about storing food. It's also about preserving it. Now here's the good news. Sugar is one of the easiest pantry staples to store. When kept dry and protected from moisture, it has an exceptionally long shelf life. It doesn't spoil the way many foods do. The biggest enemy is humidity. Moisture can cause sugar to harden into solid blocks, making it more difficult to use. That's why airtight containers stored in a cool, dry pantry work so well. Rotation is simple. Use the oldest supply first and replace it during regular shopping trips. No waste. No panic buying. Just smart planning. Another lesson seasoned preppers understand is that familiar foods matter. During stressful times, a spoonful of sugar in coffee, homemade jam on fresh bread, or a favorite dessert can provide a welcome sense of normalcy. Preparedness isn't only about calories. It's also about maintaining morale when life becomes unpredictable. Sugar earns the number 7 spot because it supports thousands of food products, depends on weather-sensitive crops, and requires an extensive processing network before it ever reaches store shelves. If those pressures continue building, certain sugar products, or the foods made from them, could remain difficult to restock well into 2027. But now we're entering the top 6. The remaining foods aren't just pantry staples. They're some of the most essential grocery items families rely on every single week. And if they disappear, replacing them won't be nearly as easy as most shoppers think. Number 6. Canned meat. We've reached the top 6, and the next item is one that experienced preppers almost always keep on their shelves. Canned meat. Whether it's canned chicken, canned tuna, canned salmon, corned beef, or canned roast beef, these products have become some of the most dependable sources of shelf-stable protein available in any grocery store. And that's exactly why they can become difficult to restock during periods of uncertainty. Unlike fresh meat, canned meat doesn't require refrigeration until it's opened. It can be stored for years under the right conditions. It's ready to eat straight from the can if necessary, and it can be turned into dozens of quick meals with only a few pantry staples. Mix canned chicken with rice. Add tuna to pasta. Use canned beef in soups or stews. Make salmon patties. Prepare sandwiches, tacos, casseroles. The possibilities are almost endless. That's why demand for canned meat tends to surge whenever shoppers become concerned about inflation, severe weather, or supply chain disruptions. People know it's practical. They know it lasts. And they know it offers something every emergency pantry needs: reliable protein. But demand isn't the only challenge. Producing canned meat is far more complicated than simply placing cooked meat into a can. It begins with livestock or commercial fishing operations. Then comes processing, cooking, quality inspections, canning, sterilization, packaging, warehousing, transportation. Every one of those steps depends on specialized equipment, skilled workers, metal cans, energy, and efficient logistics. If even one link in that chain slows down, production can quickly fall behind demand. Metal packaging deserves special attention. Canned foods rely on steel or aluminum containers, and shortages or higher prices for those materials can limit production even when enough meat is available. Manufacturers may prioritize their most popular products while reducing less common varieties, leaving shoppers with fewer choices on store shelves. Another factor is consumer behavior. When fresh meat prices rise, families often turn to canned alternatives because they offer convenience, a long shelf life, and less waste. That increased demand can empty shelves much faster than stores are able to replenish them. Experienced preppers recognize this pattern. They don't wait until the canned food aisle looks half empty. They build a steady supply during ordinary grocery trips. 1 or 2 extra cans today, a few more next month. Over time, that creates a dependable reserve without straining the family budget. Storage couldn't be much easier. Keep cans in a cool, dry location away from excessive heat and freezing temperatures. Avoid stacking them in damp basements or garages where rust may become a problem. And always rotate your inventory. Use the oldest cans first. Replace them during regular shopping. Preparedness works best when your emergency food becomes part of your everyday meals. Nothing sits forgotten on the shelf. Everything stays fresh through regular use. Another benefit of canned meat is flexibility. During a prolonged power outage, you don't have to worry about thawing frozen meat or losing expensive groceries if the electricity stays off for several days. Having shelf-stable protein already available removes one major source of stress during emergencies. That's why seasoned preppers consistently rank canned meat among their highest priorities. It provides nutrition, convenience, versatility, and peace of mind. Canned meat earns the number 6 spot because it depends on complex production systems, specialized packaging, and consistently high consumer demand. If supply pressures continue building, some varieties could remain difficult to restock well into 2027. And now we're entering the top 5. From this point forward, Every food on our list has the potential to affect millions of households in a very personal way. The next item isn't just something you eat. It's one of the most important ingredients behind countless meals prepared every single day. Number 5. Cooking oil. We've officially reached the top 5. From this point on, every food on our countdown has the potential to affect nearly every household. And at number 5 is one of the most essential ingredients in any kitchen. Cooking oil. It may not seem like a food that's at risk. After all, grocery stores usually dedicate an entire aisle to it. Vegetable oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, peanut oil, avocado oil, olive oil. There always seems to be plenty. But appearances can be misleading. Behind every bottle is a global supply chain that depends on weather, agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, and energy. If several of those systems come under pressure at the same time, restocking shelves becomes far more difficult than most shoppers realize. Cooking oil begins with crops. Soybeans, canola, sunflowers, oil palms, peanuts. Each one grows under different conditions, but they all share one thing in common. They depend on successful harvests. A severe drought can reduce yields. Flooding can destroy fields. Heat waves can stress crops during critical growing stages. Powerful storms can delay harvesting or damage infrastructure needed to process the crops. When harvests shrink, oil production usually shrinks right along with them. Then comes processing. Turning seeds or fruit into cooking oil requires specialized industrial equipment. Factories operate around the clock using large amounts of electricity and fuel. Once the oil is produced, it still has to be filtered, bottled, packaged, and shipped to warehouses before it finally reaches grocery stores. Every one of those steps adds time and cost. Another issue many people overlook is packaging. Every bottle requires plastic or glass containers, caps, labels, and shipping materials. If manufacturers struggle to obtain those supplies, or if transportation slows, finished products can remain stuck in warehouses even when enough oil has already been produced. Demand creates another challenge. Cooking oil isn't purchased only by households. Restaurants rely on it every day. Fast food chains use enormous quantities. Commercial bakeries depend on it. Food manufacturers use it in thousands of packaged products. That means grocery shoppers aren't the only ones competing for available supplies. When inventories tighten, businesses often buy in large volumes, making certain products disappear from retail shelves much faster than expected. Experienced preppers understand that cooking oil isn't just useful on its own. It's an ingredient that makes dozens of other emergency foods more enjoyable. Rice, beans, pasta, freeze-dried vegetables, homemade bread. A small amount of cooking oil can dramatically improve flavor, texture, and nutrition. That's why they make a point of keeping extra bottles on hand. Storage is straightforward. Keep unopened bottles in a cool, dark location away from direct sunlight and excessive heat. Heat is one of the fastest ways to shorten the shelf life of cooking oil. Rotation is equally important. Use the oldest bottle first. Replace it during your next grocery trip. This keeps your supply fresh while gradually building a comfortable reserve. Some preparedness-minded families also keep more than one type of oil. If one variety becomes difficult to find, another can often serve the same purpose. That flexibility reduces dependence on any single product. Preparedness isn't about perfection. It's about having options. Cooking oil earns the number 5 spot because it depends on multiple agricultural crops, energy-intensive processing, global transportation, and constant demand from both households and the food industry. If those pressures continue through the coming months, certain oils could remain difficult to restock well into 2027. Now we're entering the top 4. The remaining foods aren't just valuable. They are foundational. And the next one has been feeding civilizations for thousands of years, making it one of the most important staples any family can keep in their pantry. Number 4. Dried beans. At number 4 is one of the oldest, and most dependable, foods ever stored in a pantry. Dried beans. For centuries, families have relied on beans to provide affordable nutrition during good times and bad. Long before supermarkets existed, Long before freezers became common, people stored sacks of beans because they understood a simple truth. When times become uncertain, foods that last a long time and provide reliable nutrition become incredibly valuable. That hasn't changed. Today, dried beans remain one of the smartest foods experienced preppers keep on hand. Pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, navy beans, great northern beans, lentils, split peas, chickpeas. Each offers its own flavor and nutritional benefits, but they all share the qualities that matter most during supply disruptions. They're inexpensive, they are shelf-stable, they are filling, and they're packed with protein, fiber, and essential nutrients. So why could dried beans become difficult to restock before 2027? The first reason is simple: demand. Whenever grocery prices rise, families begin looking for affordable ways to replace expensive meat. Beans are usually one of the first alternatives people choose. They provide satisfying meals at a fraction of the cost of many animal proteins. As millions of shoppers make that same decision, grocery inventories can disappear surprisingly fast. But demand isn't the only challenge. Beans are still an agricultural crop. Farmers depend on successful growing seasons to produce healthy harvests. Extended drought can reduce yields. Heavy rainfall can damage crops before harvest. Extreme heat can lower production. Unexpected weather events can delay planting or harvesting. When those problems occur across multiple growing regions, supplies tighten quickly. Transportation creates another obstacle. Dried beans must be harvested, cleaned, sorted, packaged, shipped to distribution centers, and finally delivered to grocery stores. Every stage depends on fuel, labor, and reliable logistics. If transportation slows or costs continue rising, replenishing store shelves becomes more difficult. Another factor many people overlook is food manufacturers. Beans aren't sold only in bags. They're also used in canned soups, frozen meals, snack foods, bean flours, plant-based meat alternatives, and countless prepared products. That means grocery shoppers compete with commercial food companies for the same supply. When inventories become limited, shortages can spread across multiple grocery aisles, not just the section where dried beans are sold. Experienced preppers understand something important about dried beans. They aren't just emergency food. They're everyday food. A bag of beans can become chili, soup, bean salad, rice and beans, tacos, burritos, curries, casseroles, or countless other meals. Learning to cook with beans before you actually need them makes preparedness much easier. Storage is another major advantage. When kept dry and protected from moisture, pests, and extreme temperatures, dried beans can remain usable for many years. Many preparedness-minded families package them in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and place those bags inside food-grade buckets for long-term storage. Others simply keep unopened bags in a cool, dry pantry and rotate them regularly. Both approaches work well. Rotation remains the key. Use what you store. Store what you use. That simple philosophy helps avoid waste while ensuring your emergency pantry stays fresh and practical. Another benefit is flexibility. If fresh groceries become expensive or difficult to find, dried beans give you the ability to prepare nutritious meals using inexpensive pantry staples already on hand. That's exactly why seasoned preppers continue recommending them year after year. Dried beans earn the number 4 spot because they're affordable, incredibly versatile, easy to store, and one of the first food shoppers reach for whenever economic uncertainty begins affecting grocery budgets. If supply pressures continue, they could remain one of the hardest pantry staples to keep fully stocked before 2027. Now we're down to the top 3. The remaining foods don't just affect one meal. They influence hundreds of products throughout the grocery store. And the next one is something nearly every family buys, often without realizing just how essential it really is. Number 3. Wheat. We've reached the top 3. And the next food isn't just another pantry staple. It's one of the foundations of the global food supply. Wheat. Most people don't buy wheat itself. Instead, they buy what wheat becomes: bread, pasta, crackers, breakfast cereal, cookies, cake, pizza dough, tortillas. bagels, pretzels, flour, and thousands of processed foods lining grocery store shelves. That's what makes wheat so important. When wheat becomes difficult to restock, the impact isn't limited to a single product. It spreads across nearly every aisle in the supermarket. So why could wheat supplies remain under pressure well into 2027? The answer begins in the fields. Wheat is grown across multiple continents, but successful harvests depend on stable weather during critical stages of the growing season. A severe drought can dramatically reduce yields. Flooding can wash out fields or delay planting. Extreme heat during grain development can lower both quality and production. Unexpected freezes can damage crops before harvest. And because wheat is harvested only during certain times of the year, a poor season can't simply be fixed a few weeks later. Farmers often have to wait until the next planting cycle. That's months of lost time. But weather is only part of the story. Growing wheat has become increasingly expensive. Farmers rely on fertilizer, diesel fuel, irrigation systems, tractors, combines, replacement parts, and skilled labor. If the cost of any of those inputs rises significantly, producing wheat becomes more expensive, even during years with decent harvests. Then comes transportation. Millions of tons of wheat move through a global network of railroads, trucks, ports, cargo ships, grain elevators, and milling facilities. A disruption at any point in that chain can delay deliveries and tighten supplies. And because wheat is traded internationally, problems in one major exporting country can influence prices and availability around the world. Another factor is demand. Wheat isn't just consumed directly by families. Commercial bakeries rely on it every day. Restaurants use it. Schools, hospitals, food manufacturers, snack companies. Virtually every corner of the food industry depends on a reliable supply of wheat. When production falls short, those industries all compete for the same grain. That's one reason shortages can last much longer than people expect. Experienced preppers understand that wheat is more than just food. It's food security. Many choose to store whole wheat berries because they generally have a much longer storage life than flour. With a grain mill, those berries can be turned into fresh flour whenever needed. Others prefer storing flour because it's ready to use immediately. Either approach provides flexibility. And flexibility is one of the greatest strengths of a well-planned pantry. Another important preparedness lesson is learning basic baking skills. Knowing how to bake bread, flatbreads, biscuits, or simple rolls gives you far more options if store shelves become unpredictable. A few basic ingredients can become dozens of satisfying meals. That's knowledge that never expires. Preparedness isn't just about having supplies. It's about developing useful skills before they're needed. Wheat earns the number 3 spot because it's the hidden foundation behind thousands of grocery products, depends on weather-sensitive harvests, and moves through one of the most complex agricultural supply chains in the world. If global production remains under pressure, some wheat-based products could take much longer to fully recover than many shoppers expect. Only 2 foods remain. The next one is one of the most important sources of protein in the grocery store. It takes years to produce, billions of dollars to raise, and if supplies become tight, restocking them isn't something that can happen overnight. Number 2. Beef. At number 2 is one of the most resource-intensive foods in the entire grocery store. Beef. For many families, beef is more than just another source of protein. It's hamburgers on the grill, tacos on Tuesday, pot roast on Sunday, steaks for special occasions, meatballs, chili, roast beef sandwiches. It's a staple of countless American meals. But behind every package of beef is a production system that takes years, not weeks, to complete. And that's exactly why beef can remain difficult to restock long after other foods have recovered. Unlike chickens, which can reach market weight in a matter of weeks, cattle require much more time to mature. Ranchers invest years into raising each animal. They need healthy pasture, reliable water, quality feed, veterinary care, equipment, labor, transportation, and suitable weather throughout every stage of the process. If one part of that system breaks down, rebuilding it isn't quick. For example, during extended droughts, many ranchers are forced to make difficult decisions. When pasture dries up and hay becomes scarce, feeding large herds becomes much more expensive. Some producers reduce the size of their herds simply to stay in business. That may solve an immediate financial problem, but it creates a much bigger one later. Once herd numbers decline, rebuilding them takes years. A rancher can't simply replace thousands of cattle by next month. New calves must be born, raised, fed, and cared for before they eventually enter the food supply. That long production cycle is one reason beef shortages can last far longer than shortages of many other foods. Feed costs create another challenge. Corn, hay, soy products, mineral supplements. Every increase in feed prices raises the overall cost of producing beef. If drought affects grain production at the same time pasture conditions worsen, ranchers face pressure from multiple directions. Transportation also plays a major role. Cattle move between ranches, feedlots, processing plants, and distribution centers before reaching grocery stores. Every step depends on fuel, drivers, refrigeration, and efficient logistics. Even after processing, beef must remain refrigerated throughout the supply chain. That requires electricity, specialized equipment, and reliable infrastructure. Any disruption increases costs and slows replenishment. Then there's demand. Despite higher prices, many families continue buying beef because it's a familiar part of their weekly meals. Restaurants, grocery chains, and food service companies all compete for the same supply. When inventories tighten, there simply isn't enough product to satisfy everyone immediately. Experienced preppers understand that fresh beef isn't the easiest food to store long-term. Instead, they prepare in practical ways. Some keep canned beef on hand. Others purchase freeze-dried beef for emergency food storage. Many families buy larger quantities when prices temporarily fall, divide them into meal-sized portions, and freeze them for later use. The goal isn't to fill an entire freezer overnight. It's to gradually build flexibility while prices remain reasonable. Another preparedness strategy is learning how to stretch beef further. Adding beans to chili. Mixing ground beef with rice or vegetables. Making soups and stews. Using leftovers creatively. These simple habits reduce grocery costs without sacrificing satisfying meals. Preparedness isn't always about buying more. Sometimes it's about using what you have more efficiently. That's a lesson experienced homesteaders have practiced for generations. Beef earns the number 2 spot because it requires years of production, depends on weather, feed, transportation, and refrigeration, and cannot be replenished quickly once supplies begin tightening. If production challenges continue, certain cuts and products could remain difficult to restock well into 2027. And now we've reached the number 1 food. This isn't just a grocery item. It's the foundation that supports countless products throughout the supermarket. If this one becomes difficult to restock, the effects won't stop at a single aisle. They'll be felt across the entire food system. Number 1. Eggs. We've finally reached the number 1 food that could be the hardest to fully restock before 2027. Eggs. At first glance, that might seem surprising. After all, eggs are one of the most common items in any grocery store. Walk into almost any supermarket, and you'll usually find an entire refrigerated section filled with cartons of every size. Large eggs, extra large eggs, organic eggs, cage-free eggs, brown eggs, white eggs. For decades, shoppers have become accustomed to seeing them in abundance. But appearances can change quickly. Unlike many pantry staples that can be stored for months or years, eggs are a fresh food with a relatively short shelf life. That means grocery stores rely on a constant flow of new production every single day. If that flow is interrupted, shelves can empty much faster than many people expect. One of the biggest reasons is disease. Large poultry farms are constantly working to protect their flocks from outbreaks that can spread rapidly. When a serious disease affects laying hens, producers may be required to remove entire flocks to prevent further spread. Rebuilding those flocks isn't something that happens in a few weeks. Young hens need time to mature before they begin laying eggs consistently. That recovery process can take many months, and large-scale production may take even longer to return to normal. While farmers are rebuilding, supply remains limited. And when supply drops while demand stays the same, prices usually climb. Another challenge is feed. Laying hens consume enormous amounts of grain throughout their lives. Corn, soybean meal, vitamin supplements, clean water. If feed prices rise because of poor harvests or higher transportation costs, egg producers face significantly higher operating expenses. Those costs eventually reach consumers. Energy also plays a major role. Modern egg farms depend on electricity for lighting, ventilation, feeding systems, refrigeration, and packaging equipment. Eggs must remain refrigerated throughout transportation and storage. That means every increase in fuel or electricity costs affects the entire supply chain. Then there's consumer demand. Eggs aren't just popular because they're affordable. They're incredibly versatile. Breakfast, baking, sandwiches, salads, pasta, desserts, casseroles, homemade bread. Countless recipes depend on eggs. Restaurants use them every day. Commercial bakeries use millions of eggs every week. Food manufacturers rely on them for thousands of products. When supplies become limited, every one of those industries competes for the same cartons you see at your local grocery store. That's why shortages can last much longer than people expect. Experienced preppers understand something important. You can't realistically stockpile fresh eggs for years the way you can with rice or beans. Instead, they focus on practical alternatives. Powdered eggs are one option. When stored properly, they can remain shelf-stable for an extended period and work well in baking, scrambled egg recipes, and emergency cooking. Freeze-dried eggs are another popular choice among long-term preparedness enthusiasts. Some families also preserve fresh eggs using approved long-term preservation methods when conditions allow, helping extend their usable life beyond normal refrigeration. Others simply keep a reasonable supply in the refrigerator and rotate it regularly as part of their normal grocery routine. Preparedness isn't always about storing huge quantities. Sometimes it's about knowing your alternatives before you need them. Another lesson experienced homesteaders understand is diversification. Many households that raise backyard chickens enjoy a level of independence from grocery store supplies. While backyard flocks aren't practical for everyone, they demonstrate an important preparedness principle. Whenever possible, increasing self-reliance reduces dependence on unpredictable supply chains. Even if you never raise chickens yourself, understanding how vulnerable commercial egg production can be helps explain why shortages sometimes last much longer than expected. Eggs earn the #1 spot because they're one of the most widely consumed foods in America, require continuous production, depend on healthy flocks, affordable feed, reliable transportation, and uninterrupted refrigeration. If several of those systems remain under pressure at the same time, rebuilding supplies isn't something that can happen overnight. In fact, certain markets could continue feeling the effects well into 2027. Preparedness isn't about predicting disaster. It's about reducing uncertainty. The foods we've discussed today all share something in common. They take time to produce. They depend on complex supply chains. And once shortages begin, replacing them is rarely as simple as ordering another shipment. That's why experienced preppers focus on planning ahead instead of reacting later. Building a pantry doesn't happen in one shopping trip. It happens gradually. One extra item today, another next week. Small, consistent steps create long-term security without placing unnecessary pressure on your budget. If you found today's countdown helpful, don't forget to subscribe to Prepper Pulse and turn on notifications. Every week, we share practical preparedness tips, smart grocery strategies, food storage advice, and real-world insights designed to help you stay ahead of uncertainty. Thank you for watching. Stay prepared, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next video.